so I'd like to get started. We'll start off with a KARAKIA. Thanks, Phil.
Morena koutou. Whakatakata hau ki te uru, whakatakata hau ki te tonga, kia makina kina ki uta, kia mataratara ki tai, ehi aki ana te atakura, hei tio, hei huka, hei hauhu, ti hei mauri ora.
Okay, welcome committee. First of all, I'd just like to welcome Andrew Corkill. Sounds like a character out of a James Bond movie. Here to our first meeting in our regional transport committee. So yeah, Andrew, welcome aboard New Zealand NZTA, and just give a brief introduction to the committee. It'd be great.
I'll figure this out. Hey, red works. Thanks, Dave. Yeah, kia ora all. Nice to be in the role. Big shoes to fill with David moving on. Just had a chat with Philip about that. And effectively similar to David, here is an open line for you and your elected members, mayors, when you need to navigate an issue deep into our business. I come from a background in local government and more recently sport and recreation, with Sport New Zealand as the central government agency funding sport and rec in the country. So a new space for me to be in, and great to meet those that I haven't met this morning.
Thanks, Andrew. Okay, committee, we'll go through the apologies, and we've got Deputy Mayor Angela O'Leary, and then we've got apology for leaving early if we don't get finished on time, as Angela Strange and Angus Hodgkinson.
Yeah, Chair, can we just add apologies from Eugene?
Oh, right.
As well.
Yep. Okay, and apologies for
Yeah,
Eugene. Any others
alternate
in here? Oh, yeah, David is down here for the alternate. Morning, David. Morning. Okay, so can we have a mover and a seconder for the apologies, please? Thank you, Claire, and second by Maxine. All those in favour? Carried. Okay, disclosures of interest. Is there any disclosures of interest on there? Oh, confirmation of the agenda, sorry. Dave's moving around. Can I have a mover and a seconder for
Happy to move.
Thank you, Angela. Seconder. Thank you, Rodney. All those in favour? Those against? Carried. Okay, now we're disclosure of interest. Any on the agenda today that anyone needs to disclose any interest? No? Okay, then we'll move on to health and safety. Dave, you want to give a brief on health and safety? You're on the spot.
Morning all. Most of you will be familiar with this, but in the event of an emergency, please do follow the directions of staff. The closest fire exit is through the main doors and to the right onto the road. If we end up out there, please be wary of the traffic, use the crossing to assemble in the park. And bathrooms, etc., out the door and to the left. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Okay, next on the agenda, we've got confirmation of the RTC minutes for the 6th of September. Any alterations on those, is everyone? If not, can I have a mover and a seconder that they are true and correct? Thank you, Jeanette. And second by Andrea. All those in favour? Those against? Carried. Right, receipts of the minutes of the Future Proof Committee held on the 1st of November.
Happy to move.
Thank you, Angela. A seconder? Thank you, Adrian. All those in favour? Carried. Okay, we've got no public forum today, so we're on to the director's report. Sorry, I'm rushing through it there, you guys. So we've got Nigel and Brian presenting. Morning, Brian. Morning, Nigel.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, committee members. Nice to be with you this morning for the last RTC of 2024. So I'll speak to the director's report this morning. Brian is obviously here and can assist me with any responses. If it's okay, Chair, through you, I'll take the report as read and just maybe take an opportunity to highlight a few of the key points from the paper. So there's approximately six little things to update the committee on. Notably, just a little bit of feedback on where we got to with the regional rating for public transport I'd just really like to thank all of the committee members that were present for these discussions. As Brian was the only one that attended all 11 of those engagements. So well done, Brian. But I do want to just acknowledge the efforts and support of the committee members in the room that really helped those discussions work well. So we got some really good feedback through that process. And then we will be evaluating those options further. We got some fairly clear direction in terms of preferred options. Option 3, for those that recall it, was the preferred option. That's being further refined, and it will be taken to a workshop with Waikato Regional Council on the 18th of December. And so that's where the shortlisted options will be presented again, and also coupled with an assessment of community feedback, which has come through via a public survey. So these will be developed further on the back of information received through that workshop to feed into the annual plan process and go up for public consultation. Also alongside policy development at the moment, we're going to be kicking off the regional public transport plan. So I know that this year was the RLTP. Next year we'll be looking at the RPTP. And so again, this is a fairly significant document for us as a committee and as a council. And so it will be, the development of the plan will require the input of the RTC as well as the Future Proof Public Transport Subcommittee. But ultimately, much like the RLTP, the final plan will be adopted by Waikato Regional Council. So just noting that throughout 2025, we'll be coming back to the committee in a series of workshops and engagements, because we'll need some of that guidance in terms of where we're going, and we'll continue to keep the committee appraised of this work as it develops. But expect to have a bit of a PT focus on that one next year. Members will be aware that very recently we have had to withdraw the use of bike racks on buses recently. So these are for the regional services connecting into Hamilton. We don't have them internally in Hamilton, but this is in response to an industry alert issued by NZTA in October, and the Bus and Coach Association then issued a national notice to temporarily withdraw the use of bike racks on buses. This is a national conversation that continues to be ongoing. It's probably just noted that regional councils in this process do have a limited role, as we're neither a regulator nor an assessor of vehicle compliance. And so there is work being undertaken at a national level to work with NZTA and the Bus and Coach Association to find a solution to this, and we'll continue to update committee as this progresses. Also on the director's report, there is just notice that throughout 2024, the Ministry of Education has been reviewing the school-funded bus routes, and there have been a few route changes that are proposed for 2025 in terms of either consolidations or extensions, or some being both curtailed and extended. So 19 routes have been affected of the 22 in the Waikato region. It's probably just worth noting that of these, one route has been terminated, and again, it was looking at how students are being carried on that route, and another one is being discontinued because of the limited number of students using those services. However, positively, one new route is scheduled to be established at the beginning of next year. So not all is just having removals. We do have some additions to it. So MOE continue to operate in this space, and staff will continue to engage with the Ministry of Education to understand those future reviews. Again, members might be aware of a bus driver safety bus driver fund that had been announced excuse me, in September. So this is to look at improved working environments for bus drivers. So Waikato Regional Council worked with partners at Hamilton City and South Waikato to understand what was required. There was a requirement for local share funding in this, but it was decided on the back of this not to submit an application prior to the closing date. But as further opportunities might become available, council staff will continue to assess these on a case-by-case basis. And finally, just wanting to note some professional excellence that had been recognised through the Association of Local Government Information Management. So the Waikato Regional Council customer focus team has done very well in that at that conference, and were recognised. So there were two points of interest to note. The winner of the Web Digital and Communications Training and Development Grant went to one of our staff for 2024. So Kat Waswo has been given an opportunity to undertake additional professional development through the support of a grant, and just acknowledging her efforts in this space, but also just wanting to note that the Public Transport Customer Focus Team were the winners of the Customer Experience Professional Excellence Team of the Year Award. So just really wanting to acknowledge the great work of staff in supporting the delivery of our public transport services. So just a real highlight there. So Chair, that's probably the summary from me. I'm happy to receive any questions through yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Nigel and Brian, for the report. Yeah, congratulations to once again to our staff for the awards that they've been receiving. Yeah, very well deserved. Yeah, you guys do work very hard in such a public-facing role. So yeah, thank you. Nigel, just a question on the bike racks on buses. I do know that, you know, we don't have that much say in it, but I don't know, just from an outsider, I know I've had a bit of feedback from the public. You know, it just seemed like quite an overkill to, you know, if we're worried about lighting on buses, you know, the majority of trips with bikes, I assume, would have been during the day. So, you know, have we got any indication of when a common sense resolution might be made?
Phil, have you had any further advance on this one? So I might let the director talk to it. I have a bit of feedback from staff internal discussions as we've had to return to it, but through you, Phil.
I don't have an update on how the discussion between NZTA and the Bus and Coach Association is going. It might be that Andrew can speak to that.
I was actually going to ask the same question, whether you'd had an update on what the timing of those discussions were, so I can follow that up and report back if we need to.
Thanks, Andrew.
The short answer is we don't have an update at this point. The issue is that if you allow a vehicle to carry a bike in the day and the lights are required for a reason, you're effectively providing a partial compliance, and the vehicle is either complied or not complied. And the concern the Bus and Coach Association has had is that by allowing them to be used in the day, and then if there is an emergency and the lights are required, or the bus goes through a tunnel, or it gets dark, or the rain comes down, the issue of what happens at that point means that the vehicle either complies or it doesn't, and they need, in their view, a clear direction that allows them to operate with confidence.
Thanks for that response. I just wonder, you know, if the design of these things could maybe be changed moving forward to allow for bikes on buses, because we know that for some people it's a real critical part of their first and last mile journey. So yeah, maybe in our procurement, or I suppose it is a national conversation, we could look at the design so those bike racks aren't blocking lights. Yeah.
Could also, because a lot of the contracts are getting renewed from 26 to 30, so it could fall into that as well. You know, if some design could come up before that. Thanks, Angela. Maxine.
Oh, thank you. Two matters, actually. Firstly, thanks for the update on the awards. It's always great to be working with folk who are at the highest level, so makes our region proud. The first matter is on the Ministry of Education buses. Through the year, we've had feedback from residents about their children being left off the bus because it's full. And we've raised it through this committee before, and just wondered if you could give us a bit of an update on the Ministry of Education's attitude to that.
Sorry, Councillor Van Oosten, is this in relation to urban buses or specifically to school buses
Well,
run by the
it's
Ministry
our
of
bus
Education?
network, but it's children that are going to the schools in our area, and I had understood that that was going to be raised with Ministry of Education.
Yeah, it's I don't have specifics to talk to on that one. When we do work with MOE on this one, they do note there are very clear, well, they operate to very strict guidelines in terms of when they establish bus routes, when they put ones in or out, and where they operate. The challenge that exists, I think, in the urban network is that we do have an urban service, and so they won't put one on in those areas. The overloading, I mean, it's a good problem to have for us, isn't it, at that point, but it doesn't stop the fact that sometimes students are unable to access those vehicles. And so I don't have a specific response for you on that, but I'm happy to follow up. But I can look around and see if any further staff comment might want to be made.
So the issue has come up through the year. We've had several reports to this committee and the PT committee on this topic. We have picked up on those issues, and the example of people most recently not being able to get back to Cambridge was resolved by some adjustments to the timetable, which we monitored before and after and resolved the immediate issue. The introduction of the double deckers on the Cambridge and Te Awamutu routes will have an additional impact on that. So yes, we've worked closely with several of the schools around Hamilton over the year and resolved those issues on a case-by-case basis. But the update here from the ministry is we haven't given you an update for a little while, and then there has recently been some coverage of concern in the Hawke's Bay area around the changes that have been made there, which is what prompted us to provide an update on the situation across the region for us. And hopefully this gives you some comfort that they have reviewed our services and that in the main those have been confirmed with minor adjustments without the scale of change that's been proposed for the Hawke's Bay region. But it's an ongoing issue, and the concerns that collectively you've all had with the way the school bus policy works for MOE and how it is impacted by us operating regional services and urban services is a topic that hasn't gone away. So we work closely with the ministry to work through those issues as they arise.
It's always good to keep that on the agenda with the ministry as well, so that they understand our urban issues too. Thank you for that. The other matter is with regard to the driver safety, and I wonder whether there's been the opportunity to consult with the union and the workers as well, to discuss with them what their needs are and desires. Have you, before that decision was made not to take up the funding option, had the chance to do that? Either way.
Trudy, would you like to comment on that if you can, or put you in the spot?
Thank you.
Do you need me to go back to the question, or I mean, you might have been busy with your work.
No, that's okay, Councillor Maxine. Just in response, the union has been in touch with us at the time when that initiative was announced. We were focused on securing or understanding what local share components were available to support any of these initiatives that we may put forward. We didn't get past, I guess, go in terms of the timing with understanding what the local share around the region could look like to support these applications. However, we will be engaging with the union. It was the first union that I was in touch with, and that was via our kinetic operator. So I understand through NZTA there will be another opportunity to submit to this funding round in the new year. So we will definitely ensure that we engage and understand if there are some opportunities from that side of things for the drivers.
Do you have an idea of what the timing of that second drop down might be? Or
it was mentioned at TSIG the other day there would be another round, but I would like to revert perhaps to Andrew in that case. Yeah. We
Thank
need
you.
to
I
come
just
back
would
to you.
hope that there would be the opportunity between sort of now and then to be able to round up that discussion with the union and have a full understanding about what their expectations are and what can be met in terms of funding.
Yes.
Auckland, was it that they had been allotted $15 million for screens in their buses? Is that correct?
I'm not close to the detail there. NZTA may be able to answer that.
Okay, no problem.
Sorry.
I think it was just reported. That's where I saw it in the media. Is that the sort of thing that would be appropriate on Hamilton buses?
I couldn't comment just in my opinion, but what I'd like to add is that we've also been working with the operators and we have carried out sort of a safety audit around the network, identifying some, those elements that could potentially come into this type of application. So we have now got a hazard, it's termed a hazards and safety report back from our operator. So we will also be considering what's in there and working along with HCC to identify and prioritise whether we can secure some local funding for those items and then bundle that up into the application that will go forward once NZTA open for that second round.
Oh, lovely.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
And through the chair, I wonder if this is a topic that we could revisit in the new year once we have a little bit more of that information to come back through this report.
Yeah, we can give the staff the action to bring that back in the new year. I'd just first of all like to welcome Councillor Tipamahuta online. I didn't realise that she was on there. And also, Gary, did you have your hand up? Did you want to add to the conversation?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My apologies for sticking my nose in. So we have indicated to Auckland Transport that we'll probably move ahead with co-investing in the driver protection screens. It's not 15 million, it's substantially less. In terms of the bids that we've got, we've allocated about half the budget allocation. If we do another round, we're looking to time it with your current annual plan processes for the 25-26 year.
Thanks, Gary. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'd like to introduce Gary. Gary, can you just introduce yourself to the committee?
Kia ora. So my name's Gary Maloney. I'm Principal Advisor in the agency Public Transport team and point of contact for the medium-sized regions.
Thank you, Gary. Is that your questions answered, Maxine?
Thank you very much. Yes.
Yep. Philip.
Thank you. Through the chair, Nigel, just a bit of clarity on page 31, paragraph 10, where it states that you're going to have a workshop with Waikato region on the 18th of December and come up with shortlisted options for the public transport, all the outliers. I presume that's to come up with finalising route options and funding. And will that come back to our individual council prior to going out to consultation?
Going through the chair, I can respond to that. So the workshop on the 18th is purely for the public transport rating conversation that we've had with all of the district councils. So it's about looking at that. It's not about optimisation of routes or route selection. It's just about how we pay for public transport in the Waikato. And yes, so what will happen from that is that we'll determine what would be a model moving forward for the region or models, and that will go out through consultation through our annual plan process. So territorial authorities will have the opportunity to respond through that process.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, as chair, I just would like a letter that goes from myself and the committee just to congratulate the staff on the awards, or the staff member and the staff on the awards. I think that'd be nice if we could draft up a letter to them to congratulate them. That's awesome. And also, I'd just also like to say thanks very much, Brian, for turning up for all the consultation to the TAs. I had really good replies from Paula, the Mayor of Rotorua, and David Topor, just that consultation through the regional rating consultation. And also I attended a Rotorua Lakes Community Board. So they were really wrapped, that WRC and the councillors' involvement going out to the TAs to present that with you. So well done on that. If there's no other questions, then we'll go into that the director's report be received. Can I move in a seconder for that? Thank you, Rodney. Oh, sorry, yep. Second, Maxine. All those in favour? Those against? Carried. Okay, next on the agenda, we've got public transport, the NZTA share targets, and we've got Brian presenting for this.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, I will take the report as read, but I do have a short presentation I wanted to run through just to bring the committee up to speed with where things are at. So on the 18th of November, NZTA released a discussion document containing private share interim targets that public transport authorities across the country will need to work towards. The ministerial expectation around increasing private share, which is passenger fare revenue and third-party funding, was also strongly signalled in the GPS. So staff are currently analysing and drafting a response on the implications for Waikato Regional Council and our public transport, with a report also going to the annual plan workshop of Waikato Regional Council on the 10th of December. Just in terms of the sector response, so the regional sector has also developed a response to the Minister, expressing concerns of the inability to realistically achieve proposed targets and the unreasonable timeframes associated to complete this work. So next slide. We're just talking before about the public transport rating proposal. This is a version of the slide that we saw there. So whilst we were talking about rates in that conversation, where this conversation is focused is on the private share component. And to be clear, that includes things like fare box recovery, advertising revenue, retail leasing arrangement, and other third-party revenue sources for public transport. Next slide, please. So one of the ministerial expectations in the GPS I just mentioned is that PTAs will actively work towards increasing public transport private share, including setting targets each year, so through to the end of June 27. This includes operating within approved funding of public transport, continuous programs, reviewing services that are delivering very low fare box recovery, and considering appropriate fares. So to that end, every regional council has been sent a letter proposing private share interim targets for their region. And you can see on the screen there, this is what Waikato Regional Council received in that process. These numbers and the scale of change required to achieve the national targets are different for each region or each PTA. So we understand that it's possible that we could come close to meeting the 24-25 targets, but expectations beyond that will become more difficult to achieve. Next slide. Despite the challenges, Waikato Regional Council have already implemented a range of improvements to the region's transport network that collectively have helped increase our private share revenue. So in August last year, we introduced the Meteor to the city transport network. 1 year after launch, it has the second highest patronage of all services within Hamilton City, seeing a 39% growth from September 23 to September 24. We increased public transport fares by 20% on 1 July 2024. We initially predicted that this would have dire impacts in terms of PT patronage rates. but that didn't eventuate. So what we saw was that our network was much more resilient than we perhaps anticipated, and we've seen an overall patronage increase of 18%. So the 20% fare increase has improved private share from 10% in 23-24 to, we think, what might be around 15 or 15.5% at the end of this financial year. So next slide, please. The discussion document that NZTA put out did talk about things that we should be working towards. So public transport authorities must prepare a fares and pricing policy and include this in their regional public transport plan, and we are working towards that. Public transport authorities must undertake annual pricing reviews and 6-monthly fare structure reviews. Public transport authorities must consider effectiveness of alternative interventions for achieving the fare and pricing policy objectives when undertaking reviews, and public transport authorities must specify any measures or targets as advised by NZTA, including cost recovery measures, which includes private share. So just over the page, next slide. Just wanted to just run through some of the challenges, I suppose, that we see for Waikato Regional Council. For each additional rise in fare price, there is the potential consequence for patronage to go down. So whilst we saw an increase in patronage over the last year of 18%, the opportunity for that to continue, I think, is somewhat limited. There will be a tipping point where if the fares go up, the patronage will go down. We're already halfway through financial year 24-25 with no opportunity to change course to meet the 24-25 interim target, although noting we are not too far off it. Achieving the 25-26 target will require annual plan consultation. However, the expectation is that we need to agree with NZTA, as do all PTAs, and commit to these new targets by the 19th of December 2024. We think that the achievement of the targets appears likely to require significant fare increases alongside the achievement of cost reductions in a short period of time. This will need to be managed really carefully to avoid services going into a downward spiral due to cost cuts and price hikes. We note that to achieve a 0.5% increase in private share, it will require approximately a 2% increase in private revenue, so fares, or a 2% reduction in operating expenditure, or a combination of those two. The other thing to say is that cost reduction opportunities and the timeframes that we're talking about here will be potentially stymied by our existing operator contracts. And as has been mentioned earlier in the conversation today, a number of our major service contracts, including for Hamilton, are up for renewal within the period and are likely to be affected by cost inflation. So, potentially in the order of 15 to 20% to deliver the same level of service. Over the page, please. During our long-term plan process earlier this year, Council made a decision to rate regionally for PT. We mentioned that before. Although not directly related to increasing private share, the concept strongly supports the case for a region-wide approach to public transport and how we pay for it. We are negotiating for opportunities to expand advertising on contracts for our bus network. We are developing an annual fare policy review, which would allow Council to increase fares for public transport annually. This also enables Council to adjust fares in accordance with bus indexation figures much more easily. We are doing a Local Government Act Section 17A review on public transport. The purpose of the review is to evaluate the cost effectiveness of the existing services and determine through an option analysis whether the service provided is the most appropriate where it meets the needs of our communities. Next slide. So despite all that work, the targets that I think that have been proposed from the government via NZTA, as they currently stand, we think are largely unachievable in the longer term. As I say, we've already implemented a 20% fare increase this year, and our view is that to achieve the increase in private share in future years, that it won't be achievable through fare increases alone. There are delivery and implementation issues within the imposed timeframes to have the work completed. This requires public consultation and a significant change in how Waikato Regional Council manages this new policy framework in the short and medium term. The impact of private share increases are wide-reaching and can have a significant consequence on social health and environmental outcomes. I was at a TSIG meeting yesterday, and there is a regional, I guess there's a sector-wide concern around the approach. And I think that in comparison to other PTAs where we actually do have many things in train, we've had the opportunity to engage with our elected representatives and the conversation today as well. And I think that every PTA across the country was committed to working towards increasing private share. But I think every PTA also had the view that it was largely unachievable. So next slide. The complexities of how we are going to achieve these or any alternative targets is not straightforward as just increasing fares. We have had discussions underway with NZTA. We've had our first meeting. And we understand that we need to have a response by the 11th of December, and our second meeting with NZTA I see is scheduled on the 12th of December. I guess the challenge we've got is the timeframes in having the conversation around this, informing elected officials and working on the region's transport network holistically before any detailed analysis can be given. And I guess the other thing that we were concerned about is the consequence of not complying with the targets that have been set are not clear. So one thing I suppose for committee is that today is that we are working on a response to the request from NZTA by way of a submission, I suppose, in terms of what our fare box increases might be or might need to be. We have seen that some of the larger PTAs in Auckland and Wellington have been talking about very, very large increases in fare box in fares for their networks, and I don't have any reason to believe that we would be any different to that, and that's quite significant. An option potentially through the chair would be that RTC today might make a decision to have a formal submission through to NZTA by the dates that I've indicated. And I just also acknowledge the presence of Gary Maloney on the call today. And Gary, I'm wondering if there's anything further that you might want to add to the conversation.
Kia ora, through you, Mr. Chairman. No, I'm just happy to assist and answer questions that the committee may have.
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, I do believe that we do need to make a submission. I mean, for all the points that you made in your report, especially the point that, we're renewing a lot of contracts and there will be, as you say, 15 to 20% probably cost rise in that. So I think it's congratulations on achieving the 24, 25 and preempting, our, the 1st of July with our fares and stuff like that to the staff. But yeah, I can see it for the points that you made out as unrealistic from there on in.
Chair, I wanted to just be clear that we acknowledge the request from NZTA in the discussion document. And I can say, and I've said in the presentation just now, that we either have done or are actively working on all of the things that NZTA is suggesting. So we are wanting to work with the agency on this. It's just the quantum that we're talking about, which is the problem and the timeframe.
Yep. Kevin.
Thanks, Chair. Just echo your words around expectations. I mean, this is sounding cynical. Hard to believe this government is setting unrealistic expectations on delivery and timeline, but there we go. You've answered one of my questions with your mention of a 17A review. Can I request that we look closely at the difference between regional and Hamilton City? Because, as you know, the two are fundamentally different. And public transport and smaller centres, both whether it comes into Hamilton or not, or in the case of the Taupo district, in and around smaller provincial or rural areas, is totally different to in and around a large centre like Hamilton. And I just would caution the expectations on price. And I suspect the elasticity of that would be a lot shorter than it would be in a metro area. People will vote with their feet. They just simply will not. You hike the price, they just simply won't use the service. And its failure will become a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Through the chair, yes, we certainly acknowledge the very different, I guess, public transport arrangements in Hamilton, where you've got high patronage, high frequency routes, to the services for the other parts of the region, which are less frequent and yes, would have lower patronage rates in comparison to Hamilton. So yes, that needs to be very carefully considered.
But just one more comment. If I could encourage the review to be bold and go really left field in terms of some solutions that might be available. And I know we kind of get stuck on the model of public transport delivery that we've always had in this country, but I wonder if there are other things that we could look at that might be innovative, that could solve solutions for smaller communities. And my colleague was here last month, I understand, banging the table in support of the southern part of the Taupo district. I just wonder if there are some creative alternatives to public transport that might help fill the gaps that we've got.
Again, through the chair, this was fairly consistent feedback that we received when we did our PT rating roadshow. We've heard that from a number of district councils around that. So that's certainly something that we are considering. The challenge I think that we have with it is, again, the sort of financial viability of those services, and that needs to also be considered in the context of the private share conversation that we're currently having as well. But yeah, we understand it's not a one-size-fits-all thing potentially. It's just how much that will cost, I think, is the key thing.
Brian, Angela.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thanks, Brian, for the great presentation and yeah, really succinctly outlining what the issues are. Yeah, I'll just echo some of Kevin's points around, yeah, the metro and the wider region, completely different, you know, different kettle of fish, really. Yeah, I also have an issue, you know, through the NLTF, we applied for funding within the city to do fast and frequent services, which we know, as you've outlined through the Meteor, deliver, you know, increased patronage beyond expectations, and in turn, increase fare box recovery. It just seems odd that that request was declined when it would give the results that we need. Yeah, it's odd.
Yeah. Yeah, again, through the chair, that's absolutely correct. I guess that those low-cost, low-risk funding requests that we had in our RLTP weren't matched in the NLTP. That certainly has curtailed our ability to trial and run an expansion of our services, particularly in the Hamilton area, where you would want to really get more frequent and higher patronage services in place. Yes,
Yeah.
that's a problem.
Yeah, and I guess, yeah, whatever we submit on, yeah, if we can really outline how we are already making changes that you've outlined, and rating regionally as well will really let us go a long way towards getting those solutions that are fit for purpose in every part of our region as well. Yeah, you know, increasing fares 20% in this last LTP was quite a push. You know, cost of living crisis, people are really struggling out there, and you know, to then increase again in the next year and the next year, it just seems really counterintuitive. Like, we complain about efficiencies with road use, with congestion, yet the solutions that will provide more efficiency are not funded.
Yeah, it really gets back to what is the purpose of public transport and what role does that fill in our transport ecosystem. So, yes.
Maxine.
Thank you. Thank you for your final comment, actually, because I would imagine that any submission that we would be presenting would be emphasising the public good of the transport system.
Yes, absolutely. It is public transport. It's in the name itself. It's for the public. It's funded publicly or largely. Yeah, and there's enormous benefits having that transport system for our communities, and we'll be highlighting that. Yes.
And also emphasising matters that are important to government currently with regard to congestion and holding up economic access to, effective economic benefit and growth.
It is interesting, I think, that if I just quickly compare to other jurisdictions, say in Australia, so places like Queensland and Victoria, where they are actively reducing public transport fares because of a cost of living crisis they've had coming out of the COVID pandemic, whereas the approach in New Zealand seems very different to that.
They've got a different colour government, I think. However, there is also rhetoric that implies we're not taking advantage of all the other revenue opportunities that we could. And you mentioned advertising, retail around the space. And so my question really is, how relevant is that? And would it really just come out to that the biggest burden would be borne by the passenger?
I think every little bit that we can get helps. So it helps both in, you're right though, I think in terms of the quantum, the large chunk of that would probably end up being fares, but it certainly helps, with the bottom line, but it also helps in demonstrating that we are leaving no stone unturned in our approach with this, because we see public transport as being really valuable. We want to keep it, and we want the funding to continue for that, and so that's what we're trying to do. So the point's valid though. I think the large chunk of the private share increases that we may need to make will largely come through fares. But we do get revenue through the Tahuia Cafe, for example. We get other things that we've done, and we are currently out to market at the moment for a new busback advertising contract. So there'll be revenue from those sources, but yeah, the quantum, I suppose, is.
And your report does demonstrate that we are looking at all of those opportunities.
Correct.
So I guess the report will reflect that also.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you, Chair.
Maxine. Good morning and welcome, Mayor Glenn.
My sincere apologies. A small family emergency, so I'm here late and I might have to leave early. So please accept my apologies.
Welcome. Claire.
Yes, thanks. 2 points from me, speaking for Waipa. Firstly, again, about the regional services, like we participate in 2 education services, one from Tokoroa and the other from Te Kuiti. Yeah, and so I guess this is going to be covered, caught in these fare box sort of targets. So really concerned that, as others have mentioned, the connection to tertiary education in Hamilton, by those people that are using those services means, they can get their education, they can, land a job that wouldn't be, I suppose, otherwise out of their reach, I guess. Yeah, so really concerned that this sort of short-term focus on, fare recovery is actually going to be shutting a lot of doors economically for people that live in those sort of farther reaches of the region. And the second thing I just want some clarity on is what happens if we don't reach our targets? Obviously, there's a directive to, try and comply and achieve what's been directed. But, are there consequences for us, or just to show a best endeavours approach? Have you got a bit more information about that?
I sort of wonder if someone from NZTA would care to comment on that.
Gary,
Yeah.
Gary, would you like to comment on that?
Through you, Mr. Chairman. So I think it's touched in your report. The ministerial expectation is private share increases, and the specific requirements are we look at 2 things. year-on-year increase in private share, and that councils or PTAs actively engage with the agency around setting targets. It doesn't talk about if you don't achieve those targets. I think you've picked up on it today. What we're looking, perhaps I'll start again. They are proposed targets. We are earnestly looking for feedback on the targets that we've put up. We will be reviewing the year 3 target about this time next year, and that will pick up on what we're seeing up to that point in terms of delivering on the targets. I think it's really, as you're doing, it's council going, hey, we've thought about all these things, and here's where we think we can get to. I can give you examples of councils that set a fare in 2017. They've not looked at it since. In real terms, it's lost about 1/3 of its value. So everything that you're doing now is what we're looking for.
Thank you. That's good. Really helpful. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Gary. David.
Thank you. I've got 2 questions. The first one is around the graph that was in the report that shows both in Australia and New Zealand, over time, the percentage of local share is consistently decreasing. My assumption from that, or my conclusion, would be that the fares have been held constant while costs increase. Is that correct, or is there another driver behind that?
Yes, I wonder, Gary, whether you could respond. That graph has come from the discussion document that NZTA provided.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, my apologies. I don't have a lot more detail than Brian, actually. What we've done is we've just been able to extract that data from Australian sources, so I don't know how it reflects changes in fare, and I don't have at hand how that might have tracked in terms of New Zealand and fare changes.
Because I think that's really important to understand that, because New Zealand has no population compared to Australia. And if their major cities are tracking on the same trajectory as New Zealand, that tells us that we can't turn things around unless there's some fundamental change. The second question I had was in the table under that, Waikato private share is consistently lower than on the national mean. I was wondering, as someone who's relatively new in the space, if there could be a very short summary, whether that's strategic and planned, or if that's just where we've kind of landed.
So that table is the one, again, that we received from NZTA. We understand that other PTAs potentially have higher targets in there than ours, and I guess that averages out with the national targets there. We also know in that space that Auckland Transport and Greater Wellington Regional Council, if they achieve their that's where the quantum, I suppose, of the patronage is in public transport across the country. So it's important that those 2 PTAs achieve what they want to do to have any hope of achieving the national targets. But again, Gary, I'm probably talking for you in this.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chairman. So I've been around a while, as you probably guess, and you may, for those that have been around a while, may recall going back to 2010, we just, as an agency, set a blanket fare recovery policy of 50%. We're trying this time round to do something that kind of matches how councils are tracking through time, and that's why we've published for each council a target for them, but not shared the targets at this stage for the others. I can confirm targets for Waikato are different to, for example, Otago.
So thank you for that clarification. So what that tells me is the mean is not particularly relevant for us because we're not comparing apples with apples, because you can't compare us with Auckland or
That's correct.
one of the major metro areas. Thank you, appreciate that.
Thanks, David. Okay. Sorry, Adrian.
Yeah, I guess just to add to that too is again, not comparing apples with pears, is how mature public transport is in other parts of the country, because ours is still, especially regionally, it's in a very early phase, and it takes time to build up patronage and to, and get things sort of optimised. We're not in an optimised space yet, so that cost does create that disparity, perhaps, if I can add that.
Yep.
Yeah, there are varying degrees of maturity. I think that's fair to say. Yes.
Okay. First of all, I'd just like to thank Gary for coming online. Sorry, Andrew.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Was just going to kind of wrap up and add and
Yep.
thank Gary as well
Yep.
before you did. So thanks, Gary, for beaming in from Dunedin on that one. I guess what I'm buoyed by is the fact that WRC are engaging well, and that, you know, I'm new to this, but I've seen the network of PTAs are united as a movement around this at the moment too, and absolutely acknowledge the timeframes and some of the, you know, realities around this are suboptimal in terms of the feedback we're getting nationally and from this group, and that is being heard by Gary and team. So continue to talk is my only suggestion there.
Thanks, Andrew, and thanks again, Gary. So we've got a resolution here, and I've changed a little bit. So we've got that the report be received, and then the Regional Transport Committee receive that request that the staff prepare a submission to the NZTA proposed regional private share targets, and then 3, that the committee chair, myself, and our Regional Transport Connections, Phil King, review the proposal submission to ensure it meets the view of the committee and sign and submit the submission on behalf of the committee. And I'd like to move that if there's any, or anyone likes to change the wording of that.
So not a change, but could we have a copy of the draft
Yep.
in advance of it being sent out?
Yep. Yep, we can do that. Yep. Okay, and we've got a seconder with Angela. All those in favour? Those against? Carried. Okay, I'd like to just swap around the next agendas because we've got Bev Driscoll online for the Ministry of Transport update. Bev, are you happy with that to present now?
Yes, certainly I am. Thank you.
Good morning, Bev.
Good morning, everyone. Kia ora, tēnā koutou katoa. I'm Bev Driscoll. I'm the manager of the rail team here at the Ministry of Transport. The rail team here focuses on the investment planning and funding frameworks for rail, and we have a couple of key projects underway which I can update you on. I just want to acknowledge Phil King. Thank you for the opportunity. Anything I can't cover off here today or anything you'd like to hear further about, very happy to get either myself or my colleagues to come in next year at a time that's suitable for the committee. So look, just before I talk about some of the rail work underway, I thought it might be useful just to talk a little bit about the ministry and its role, and some of the relationships we have, including with agencies with core rail roles. So look, you know, the ministry is the government's system lead on transport, delivering policy and strategy to support the government's priorities and progress the transport system. And many of you will be aware, and I know you're incredibly familiar with the government policy statement on land transport, and obviously the team here responsible for supporting the minister to develop and monitor that. We are responsible for legislation, regulation, strategy, funding arrangements, system performance assessment of work, and particularly in relation to our Crown entities. So New Zealand Transport Agency, who's here today. We work with a range of other agencies and stakeholders who have different perspectives and interests, and it's great to beam in today. Also very closely, obviously, with Auckland Transport, Auckland Council, and Greater Wellington on the metro side as well. You know, we recognise how people and freight move around the country and in the regions is critical to the growing economy. And, you know, what I will say is, I think we recognise this, there are often difficult trade-offs to be made, and it's often our job to, you know, find the best options for government to consider. And so the views and perspectives of agencies, regional land transport committees and organisations are critical there. In terms of the rail space, so obviously we work quite closely with KiwiRail as the SOE responsible for maintaining the rail network, operating freight and tourism passenger services. We're currently supporting the Minister to approve KiwiRail's rail network program, which is the 3-year investment for the below rail track and supporting infrastructure. Obviously, the Rail Network Investment Program 24-27 also has a 10-year horizon. And we also work with KiRail to develop budget bids and the like through road transport. So as you'd be aware, Rail receives money not just through the National Land Transport Fund and through Waka Kotahi, but through the Crown budget process as well. We also work closely with Treasury, responsible for monitoring KiRail's above rail commercial performance around freight in particular. And Treasury provide advice on equity injections into KiRail's above rail business. Ministry obviously providing advice with NZTA on the below rail investment. Treasury also has a role, obviously, in thinking about the wider investment across the different areas where Crown invests across transport and rail. We work closely with the New Zealand Transport Agency, who obviously monitors and manages KiRail's funding for maintenance and development, and NZTA provide that statutory assessment of the Rail Network Investment Program too. And rail safety obviously remains a critical focus for the Ministry, NZTA and all participants in the system. NZTA obviously having that rail safety regulatory role. And in addition, you've got the Transport Accident Investigation Commission, who also investigates rail accidents and incidents there. And then obviously, importantly, councils in terms of metro passenger services and interregional rail services, who have obviously responsibility for service provision and co-funding services with NZTA. So the rail system is pretty busy, pretty complex in terms of agencies' roles and funding, but we try to work with all parties to navigate decision making through ministers. I'll turn now to some of the work that we have underway. Appreciate Metro Rail, obviously the Te Huia interregional service obviously connects into the wider Auckland metro region. In Wellington, we obviously have the Capital Connection interregional services connecting into the metro networks. One of the key pieces of work for the Ministry is a review of the Metropolitan Rail operating model. So that's how we fund, govern and plan Metro Rail between the different central and local bodies involved. It's been 15 years since that model was reviewed, and we know that both regions, the scale and complexity of Metro Rail has grown quite significantly. And so we have been working with the NZTA, KiRail, Treasury, Greater Wellington, Auckland Transport to review that model and ensuring that it's fit for purpose to support, the efficient movement of people in and out of the cities. The primary focus, obviously, we have a set of objectives for that review, given the time frames in which the MROM was first established. Through our work, we've been with parties developing a clear set of shared objectives for the metro system, looking to develop sustainable, transparent, long-term funding based on agreed service level expectations, ensuring that parties have shared understanding of roles, responsibilities and accountabilities, and are appropriately incentivised to deliver on Metro Rail operations and strengthen the governance arrangements to support this. The review is well progressed, and we've been delivering advice to the Minister on the outcomes of the review. And I was hoping to be able to give you a further update today, but we expect Minister will consult with colleagues and take decisions on the Metropolitan Rail operating model review early in the new year. So we'd be very happy to come back or provide an update on the outcomes of the review and next steps there. I just want to take the opportunity to acknowledge, interregional passenger rail. The interregional passenger rail is a focus for my colleagues in the urban development and public transport team here at the ministry. We acknowledge that interregional passenger rail services are a really important transport mode and link for New Zealanders. And acknowledge the decisions to continue the Te Huia trial for 2 more years. I recognise that this has been well welcomed by the region, and I note that the outcomes of the remaining timeframes for Te Huia will be really important to inform long-term decision making around that. We also, as part of the work that the rail team has here, we also provide advice to the Minister on the rail network investment program. So that's investment below rail, both the national network and the metro regions. Obviously, KiwiRail has delivered its rail network investment program. It has NZTA has provided advice on that, and we're following up with some further advice with the Minister. He's got that. He's currently consulting his colleagues, shareholding ministers, and we expect decisions in the very near future on that. So watch this space on that. So look, that's just a very brief overview. I'll pause there. Very happy to take any questions, anything you think would be useful for a future deep dive. Very happy to do so.
Thank you very much, Bev, for the update and coming online for the committee. And we've got a question from Angela.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Bev, for your presentation. Yeah, I was kind of hoping for a bit of an update around electrification between Pukekohe and Hamilton, and the fast rail also business case, which has been sort of on the books, indicative business cases for about 5 years. But maybe next time you come to the committee, that would be good. I just had a specific question around, you mentioned interregional rail and Te Huia and the trial. Just wondering from your point of view from MOT, what you see us needing to do to secure the future of Te Huia after the trial.
Yeah, sure thing. Look, I think what will be really important is to understand the results of that trial and how it's delivered on the key performance metrics that were set at the time. Look, I think we all recognise the government, would be looking for a strong business case around the long-term arrangement for the service and the benefits that would provide. Yeah, so I think it is about that business case that comes through for that long-term investment and the benefits that provides across the region. I think will be important there, and that it represents a cost-effective service.
Okay, thank you for that. Just on that, you mentioned crowdfunding through budget processes as well. Yeah, just in regards to interregional rail, acknowledging that we're not the only passenger service that does go between regions, and the significance of the Waikato region within the North Island and New Zealand Inc. Yeah, what would be the process for budget decisions around securing more funding, say for rolling stock to improve Te Huia, given that it is a startup rail service. Capital Connection's been going for over 17 years and has definitely proven its case. I believe that Te Huia has also proven its case through the interim reports that we've provided to NZTA. We know that Golden Triangle and Hamilton to Auckland corridor is one of the fastest growing in the country. And if passenger rail doesn't make sense here, then where does it make sense? Alongside, efficiencies for freight along that corridor as well. So, yeah, just would be interested as well, just off the cuff, if you have any update on the electrification business case as well.
Yeah, sure thing. So look, I understand that QRL is working on the business case to report back mid next year. I think we'd be looking to understand what the outcomes of that work provides, what the options are in any of these situations. Obviously, the proposals and programs come through and are assessed through the Better Business Case and through the funding rounds that do occur. On the budget processes, obviously, I would suggest that the government would expect to see, as it has done in the past, the program proposals clearly, identified in regional land transport plans, working with the NZTA and its assessment of them as part of the National Land Transport Program, and the drivers for investment. Obviously, there's within the National Land Transport Program. There's both through the GPS, there's both the public transport services activity class and the public transport infrastructure class, which is the two sources of funding. That's obviously very competitively sought after in terms of the funding in that space, and further consideration of Crown money coming through, would be through that budget process. And I would expect to, Phil had previously been in touch with us about the business case that's being built there. So we would expect to be kept well in the loop on that.
Thank you, Bev.
Thanks.
Okay, if there's no other questions for Bev, thank you again, Bev. And we've got a resolution here that the report of the Ministry of Transport update be received. Can I have a mover and a seconder for that? Thank you, Claire, and a seconder, Rodney. All those in favour? Those against? Carried. Thanks again, Bev.
Thank you.
Right, I'd like to we'll have a break after this next item. We'll get this next item done, which is the TOKOROA and TIKAWITI bus funding decision, and this is the only decision we've got today. So we've got Trudy and Vincent, is it? Mina, or just Trudy? No, bye. Sorry. Yep. Morning, Vincent. Morning, Trudy.
Good morning, Chair and committee members. So Trudy and I are here today to talk about the report relating to the funding for TIKAWITI and TOKOROA bus service. With your permission, I would like to take the report as read, but we'll highlight a couple of key points from the report. But firstly, just want to make a quick correction. So there's a typo in the report under the staff recommendations. So under point 2 of the staff recommendations, it says WRC funds the local share funding gap until July 2024. So that should be July 2025. And it should be funded via the 24-25 year operational cost saving, not the 23-24. So just a quick correction to the report.
Okay, Vincent.
So I guess the report provides the history and the current funding arrangement for the trial service. and I'm not going to repeat all the details, but just want to, I guess, highlight a few things. So in terms of the current funding situation or the funding gap, I think to some extent this was a result of the, I guess, the current funding framework. So it has been very challenging in terms of trying to coordinate the funding decision across 5, 6 different funding partners for the service, while each party has its own sort of funding processes and priorities. So it's very hard to achieve this funding alignment across the board. In some cases, it's a bit of chicken and egg. So some of the parties' funding commitment is contingent on others' funding commitment, or vice versa. So it's make it quite challenging to get agreement across the board. And I guess this is a prime example of why WRC has been advocating for the regional targeted rate, just simply trying to kind of remove or to simplify the whole process. So in terms of report, so the total funding gap for this year is around 127K. And the staff have recommended that this local share be picked up by WRC via the operational saving from this year. And I think I will, with the next report, there's another report in terms of the operational update, which will highlight in terms of this year's performance in the fare, potential kind of increased fare revenue. So I guess the recommendation is for WRC to pick up the local share, either through the operational saving or through the public transport reserve, with the assumption that year 2 of the local share will be collected through the region-wide PT targeted rates.
Okay, Vincent and Trudy, I'd like to move this resolution. I do think it's an important bus route that goes through there. I mean, I'm quite welcome to hear from any of the other TAs, that are in that area, but I do believe that it's essential that we do keep this going until we find out the result of the regional rating proposal, and if it can be uptake by operation, that savings, I think that'd be good. So, Jeanette.
Just wanted to thank your support and the committee's support, and I'd like to really acknowledge the work that the staff have done, and particularly Vincent, and he's been very responsive to my questions. Thank you. And excellent report. And just to doubly acknowledge how difficult it has been under this current system, and how much work has gone into the proposals, and I think they're excellent. And just saying this is a very great opportunity, particularly for the Takawiti area, for opportunity for employment and opportunity for education. And now, if we are to have it secured for 3 years, then we can really do some work on getting those numbers and making it part of people's lives. So thank you for your support.
Yeah, Jeanette, I've had meetings with John and how important, they believe that this bus route is, that goes right the way through there, just through the uncertainty of, the hospitals and, education as well, just, getting students up to university. So we've also got a seconder in Angela. So any other questions for Trudy or Vincent? If not, do you want me to read the resolution, or are you quite happy that everyone's read it and happy with it? Oh, sorry. Let's change that. Oh, the dates, yeah. So, yeah, Vincent, we've changed those dates to the 25th. Okay, all those in favour? Those against? Carried. Okay, we'll break for 5 or till 11 o'clock and have a coffee and a bit of a stretch. So back sharp on 11 o'clock, because I'd like to get finished by 12:30-ish.